they get sold into slavery. Aristotle probably would have disagreed. He'd have been like,
yeah, he was a nerd. I love that idea in my head. I'm never going to forget that.
It can get weird, right? Like, is the sun conscious? Does the earth have a sense of consciousness?
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me. I didn't need that. All right, man. Let's walk down the path. Let's figure out where this is going.
Aristotelian logic, because it's the bedrock of modern science still, even today.
Okay. And, cool. Yeah, let's get into that then.
Yeah. So, like, you have to keep it in context though of like who these people were, and what they had done was like really impressive, right? Like I'm speaking Aristotle specifically. He formalized logic. Like he's the guy. He's it. You know what I mean? Like he's the guy. So he gave us the first system of logic, and in a lot of ways that was sort of the birth of mathematics also, right? But it's the very beginning of empiricism, of needing to verify things through evidence, you know, and being with what's in front of you and not basing ideas off of, you know, untangible things, let's just say, right? Okay. Which is great. And it was super useful, and very successful. And we still like it today. The problem is that how he constructs the entirety of his view, all of it, is literally he starts with saying that you can't have things that are both true and false, right? Which seems very reasonable to say.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, that's kind of my first impression, right?
Well, it seems amazing. Like,
yeah.
Like, yeah. So he's like, oh, this is obviously true. Right. And so we start there, and he's like, I'm going to start with the most obvious thing in the room, and I'm going to say that something can't be both true and false. And so, which is great. And so you can't have contradictory statements like A is both true and then A is false, because if you have that in a formal system of logic, which he builds out, you can make nonsense, right? And so, you know, if A is false, A is true, B is the universe is made out of cheese and we're good. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which, I mean, not a terrible I might buy into that if we're talking about cheese.
Of course it's, yeah. But it was a great idea. And it makes sense. And I think it was pretty hard to refute at the time, although there were some very good critiques, which he tries to address. It's not like as if he didn't know about the critiques. So like a specific one would be, here's a way I can prove right now that can't work. And I will write on a board and I will say, this sentence is false.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Huh?
Yeah. So you can immediately get some counterexamples. Now he didn't like those. He called them, you know, like sophist arguments. And so sophists were these people who just ask a lot of questions, right?
Just real a-holes, right?
Yeah. And it was just seen as like, now you would call them, we have other names for, you know, similar kinds of things. These sort of themes will pop up a lot, but these sophists are sort of like these airy-fairy, they can always sort of point out, but their arguments are sort of intangible and meaningless as far as like Aristotle was concerned, right? And so he goes, you're just making a semantic trap that I'm trying to fall in. And then he would go to say things like the man himself can be claiming that he speaks truthfully of lying, right? And so then the logical error disappears because the man is being truthful about lying. And so, but the problem is that he's sort of correct, but I could, like I just said, if I write it on the wall and then walk away, there's no man saying the sentence is false. Right. And so where does the the error is in the logic itself, and he never actually fully addressed that. He gets around it by, pointing to the person could be telling the truth about lying or whatever. And
he adds another variable, basically. Right?
Yeah, and he basically says you're just trying to use semantics to trap me, and you're not really being honest about the situation, right? And so that was sort of his whole point. And it seems like, something like this has to work, because then nothing could make any sense, right?
Yeah.
So he builds everything from there, and implicitly, everything has kind of stayed that way, even though now we know for sure that this can't work. We have too many examples of like real world things that don't fit this, and so like quantum mechanics sort of kind of killed this idea that things can't be true and false at the same time.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but not just that. There's other ones, But like if I was in a room with Aristotle, I would have done that. I would have written this sentence is false on the wall and then walked out and then see what he said. You know what I mean? And then he would have been like, he wouldn't have liked it. He would have kicked me out of his.
Well, and he was pretty contrarian too, as far as the teachings that he grew up with, and then came back with. Except his solutions worked well. He wasn't like a sophist where he just was like nana boo boo, your shit don't work.
Yeah.
Right. So
he. Yeah.
Okay. The quantum mechanics thing got me messed up. That's a good point, right? Because when you're talking about it can't be true and false at the same time, you're talking about things like can't exist in two places at once kind of thing, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Two things that are mutually exclusive can't be true at the same time. That's what his point was, but you can have that. You can have literally things that aren't real. But if I go to measure them, they are real. And so what's the answer there when I'm not looking at it? And there is no answer. And it's sort of, it's a real major issue. Now, there are ways to solve this. It's not like, so the problem with classical logic is that the entire system unfolds when you bring in one contradiction, right? So if I prove that there's any one contradiction in any of it, then the whole thing falls apart. And so if non-contradiction isn't true, then classical logic, Aristotelian logic doesn't work, right? The whole thing falls like a house of cards. But there's ways around it now. So we have, there's branches of logic that don't use the law, that don't need the law of non-contradiction. You can have, so like one of my favorite versions was created by Donald Hoffman and these other mathematicians. He's not a mathematician, but his colleagues in the 90s. And it's basically, you have degrees of truth or falseness, right? And so you can have, so instead of a binary 0 or 1, it's true or false, you can have any value, any continuous value from 0 to 1, right? And so then it kind of just gets rid of the whole thing. It doesn't fall in on its face.
So it's got like a truthiness and a falsiness to it, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's contextual, and it depends on, you can have systems, like a lot of non-Boolean systems of logic, it's fine. You can totally have law of you don't need the law of non-contradiction. So you can have sets that just can't be compared, right? And so there's no way to say whether or not they're true or false compared to each other. And so there's just all kinds of ways around it. But the classical sense of something being true and something being false was what Aristotle was saying. He's saying that something is so true, it has to be true, right? And that's self-evidently true. And he starts there, right, with the law of non-contradiction. And then he builds out the rest of his logic. The problem is that all of those self-evident truths aren't self-evident truths. They're assumptions that he was using to build a model, which is what everyone does, right?
Right.
And so the crux of the whole thing is that there is no truth and that you can't actually get to it. There's no system that anyone has ever made, ever, that gives you a truth that's self-evidently true, ever. You just can't have it. And the problem is that we started science off. Science was around before Aristotle, and there's a lot of ups and downs, and we'll cover, I think we'll probably get into a lot of it, but that whole concept is just fundamentally flawed. and this echoes on into the other assumptions that get made and the other sorts of, models that get put forth. Aristotle himself was, he believed in like a first mover, an unmoved first mover, right? And so it's not like, and his whole perspective would have been to find the meaning of things. So he would have thought things had inherent meaning and that it was evident in what they would do. And so, like, for example, like the meaning of an acorn is to be an oak tree.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? And so he had meaning inherent in his ideas, whereas modern science, we've stripped away all meaning. It's meaningless. It's purposeless. Things have functions, but they don't have meaning. Aristotle would have disagreed with that completely, right? But the same logical errors that he's making are still present today. And we can show logical error is not even the right way to say it because it's sort of outside of logic almost, but you can show that it's inconsistent with itself and it won't work.
Okay.
Not that you can build a logical framework that works perfectly, right? It's not inconsistent with itself. I shouldn't say that, but you can show that logical system does not cover everything, which is sort of basically what Gödel's incompleteness theorem kind of really gets at. It's like, it's not going to show you everything, period. You just won't get everywhere. Right.
Gotcha.
And so that's really the crux of it. It's not to say that you can't have some perspective on truth that seems very accurate and from your perspective is true. Right. Like, for example, you're sitting at your desk and your computer's there. I know the desk is right here. That seems very true to me. Right. But if we listen to everything that we've learned for the last 2,000 years, it would tell us that our understanding of that truth is incomplete.
Our understanding of that truth is incomplete. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, man. Let's walk down the path. Then figure out where this is going.
Well, Aristotle, so he came up with his ideas mostly. There was a lot of messiness that had been going on with, I say messiness, but so Plato was a student of Socrates. Maybe we should start there. Socrates was sort of this wild guy. He was a soldier. He was an Athenian soldier. From all accounts, lived in pretty dramatic poverty, but he was a good soldier. Kind of had a wild ride of a life. He had saved the life of this one guy who ended up being this crazy character later on. And he was a philosopher, and he would just ask people questions. And that was his whole deal. As he would just ask you questions, and he believed that everyone had all of the answers already inside of them. And so he was trying to draw it out. And so he would draw it out from you, right? Okay. That's the Socratic method. The way I was taught the Socratic method when I was young was ask questions to search for an answer, right? But Socrates believed the answer was inside of you already, and that he would show people how they already knew something. And so they would be like, how does blah, 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 whatever the question is, And then he would just ask them questions until they answered it.
Okay. A little invasive, but also motivational, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that was his whole thing in Athens, and he was very popular. And he was just sort of this wild guy, and he would just like come up to you if he thought you were interesting and start fucking talking to you, So you'd just be like walking down the street, and all of a sudden you got this old crazy looking guy asking you a bunch of questions, and you're like, hey, okay.
Well, you said he was a veteran, right? So
yeah, he's a veteran. Well, everyone was. So it's like everyone was basically. A lot of people were in the military. Let's just say it like that. There was a lot of fighting. There was always a lot of fighting.
That makes sense. Yeah.
The other Greeks, Persians, and stuff.
Because around what year range was this? It's like
Socrates is like 440, 420
BC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was a lot of upheaval. Now, Plato, who was a student of Socrates's and would, go to his little thing and talk to him every day. Plato was born an aristocrat, so he came from a richer family. They had actually had a lineage connection to like the last king that had been in Athens, I think somewhat indirectly, I'm not really sure. But anyways, they were an aristocratic family, kind of important in Athens. And he would follow Socrates around. And there was a lot of dissent against democracy. People were pretty unhappy with democracy. And there was a couple of tries at an uprise against it. And then for about a year, Plato's uncle actually, and some of his cousins, or maybe just one of his cousins. Anyways, his family were like the leaders of this 30 group of people. They were called 30 tyrants, and they basically took over the city. Right?
Good look. Yeah.
No, they took over for a year. Right? Or a little over a year, and they controlled the whole city, and they killed, I think, 5% of the population.
Okay. Yeah, honestly, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I mean,
well, they executed, it was a lot of people, and they were mostly important Athenians, and they exiled even more. Right. But they were eventually overthrown by people who came back and did not like them. Now, Socrates wouldn't join them, but several of them had been his students, and they actually tried to get him to, I think, set someone up or something like that. I forgot what it was. And Socrates just like walked away from him, like literally like risking his own life, and just walked away. Yeah. He was like, no. So he didn't join them in the tyranny, but when the people who had been exiled came back and, quashed the rebellion, some of them very much did not like Socrates. So he had been there. Some of the people who were in the rebellion, were his students, like I said, but then also one of his closest friends who he had saved his life when they were soldiers together, kind of valiantly, like the guy was fallen in battle, and Socrates refused to leave his side, and it was like fighting people off until they could get him to safety. Was this? Yeah.
You're not doing a whole lot to get me to not be on Socrates' side.
Yeah. No, he's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's awesome. I love him. Socrates is like my favorite. I feel, honestly, if there's a theme to all of this, it's we want to take a step back and be more like Socrates and ask Plato and Aristotle questions, because they were the ones who sat in their certainty. And Plato, not so much, but Aristotle's definitely.
Right? That checks out. Yeah.
Yeah. But Socrates, I think, so Socrates died before before Aristotle was ever around. So I think he was born, like Aristotle was born like a year or two later. So he wasn't around for any of this, but Socrates, so he's kind of like a war hero, but this guy that he had saved was like the greatest traitor in all of history. So I know, yeah. So it's like Alcibiades. I can't say his name right, but he's such an interesting fucking guy. So he gets pissed off with the things that are going on in Athens. He betrays them to Sparta by setting up and telling the Spartan generals how to attack Athens and take over.
Classic. Right? Yeah.
But then he supposedly got the Spartan king's wife pregnant. Freaks out. Dude. Goes to Persia. Tells them, I can tell you how to defeat both Athens and Sparta.
That was the same dude?
Same dude. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. No, this is all history too. So he goes there, and he's now betraying everybody. Actually, when the 30 tyrants took over, they were so worried about him because despite like how he had betrayed everybody, everyone still really liked him for some reason. And they were like worried that he would come and overthrow them, right? Because he's with the Persians now. And so they kind of like back channeled and then got a Persian governor to have him assassinated and burned his house down while he was sleeping.
Dude, how has this not been like an HBO series?
I know, it's so cool. It's so interesting. Like, what in the hell? This guy seems like a James Bond kind of character. Like he was, but anyway, so that guy was like, the people who were in power did not like him, right? That took power after the tyrants didn't like him, but then the people who took power later also didn't like him because he was this traitor, right? And so, and that was like Socrates' guy, or they were friends or whatever.
My boy,
yeah. And these guys took power. And here's the thing, though, is they gave everyone amnesty. And so after that had happened, they said, no more revenge. We're not going to keep going back and forth because democracy will keep getting overthrown. And then it'll come back with this, and then it'll come back, and then no more. We're going to end it now. So everybody who was a part of the tyrant regime, now a lot of them had been exiled and a lot of them had died in the fighting and stuff. Like Plato's family was all dead, the ones who were a part of the tyrants. But they gave amnesty to everyone else. So no more punishments, right? Okay. However, these guys really didn't like Socrates. Specifically, the main guy, his son had actually been one of Socrates' students. I forgot his name now, but he was a very successful tanner, like, tanning hides. and he was the main general in the in the democratic rebellion that took back from the tyrants, right? He was like one of the main guys. So he was like basically the leader at the time, more or less. I mean, it was a democracy or whatever, but he's the one who brought charges against Socrates with a couple of other people. And his son specifically had been told to just be a philosopher instead of going into the family trade.
Yeah.
Which really pissed him off. And then a couple of other people, the same thing happened to their kids. Socrates is just like, telling them to
it's just sucking them up. Yeah.
And so they couldn't directly charge him with, being the leader or being the teacher of these leaders, but these rebellious leaders, right? But they charged him with corrupting youth. And I forgot, there was another religious charge about the gods,
Sure. And, tack it on.
Yeah. And so they had tried to kick him out of Athens. They just wanted him to go, right? They had a whole trial. Socrates actually made them look really foolish at many points in time because he's very clever.
Yeah.
And
it feels like it would be like trying to have a trial against the best lawyer on the planet, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the guys who, I forgot what his name, I don't remember the exact transcripts from the court. It's written, some of it's written down. Plato spoke for him, but he was pretty clever in a lot of his arguments. They couldn't really pin him down, right? But they were going to find him guilty no matter what, though. So they found him guilty, and they wanted him to leave, right? But he refused exile. And so he basically just forced them to kill him.
Yeah.
And so he, and they poisoned him by hemlock. So he had to drink a poison and stuff. And
that's how they did it back then?
Well, I think, I don't know if you got to choose or not. I'm not sure.
Something about that seems poetic. I feel like there was a reason behind that,
Yeah, all of his students were around. Plato wouldn't go. It says that Plato was sick that day, but maybe not. Maybe he just didn't want to see his,
Yeah, I would have said, yeah.
They were really close. So after that, Plato was enraged because, they just sentenced Socrates to death. So Plato was a critic of democracy before. So the Athenian form of democracy, you have to realize, is really mob rule. You know what I mean? It's literally everyone gets a vote. Every freed man gets a vote. Right. And so,
sure.
But there's no Senate, there's no congressman, there's no nothing like that. And so this is why the founding fathers in America actually spent so much time trying to figure out how they were going to form the government, because they didn't want Athenian democracy, which was just mob rule, just as many, whatever the majority says goes.
Right.
It can be really dangerous and people do crazy stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So Plato was a critic of it beforehand. And then when his uncle and cousin were going to take power, he was pretty supportive of that, until they turned into a tyrant, right? And it turned into a bloodbath. And then he was very critical of that. He wouldn't really have anything to do with it. And then democracy came back and then killed his master, right? So he was pretty sick of the whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
Right? And he was like, fuck all this. He goes off, he leaves Athens, right? He goes on this odyssey for over a decade of traveling the world. And he goes to these great centers of learning. So he goes with the Pythagoreans in Italy. And there he met, I forgot what the guy's name was, but the leader of the Pythagoreans at the time.
Pythagoras. Yeah.
No, this is
I got you. I got you on this one. Yeah.
He sees this guy who's ruling. And it is like a cult, but everything was a cult back then. So it wasn't a big deal. But he saw a philosopher king for the first time. What his opinion of what a philosopher king became, right? He sees this guy who is a philosopher, but he's also the leader. He's also the ruler. And he saw how benevolent he was and how wise he was in making his choices. And he eventually develops this idea later on of that's what we need in reality, is a philosopher king. We can't have democracy. We can't have aristocracy. We can't have tyrants. We need philosopher kings, right? That's what his opinion was. So he actually did not like democracy, right? So if you read some of his stuff now, you're like, this guy doesn't like democracy. This is weird. He didn't like mob rule, and he had seen personally and thought about a lot of wise, benevolent leaders, right?
Yeah.
And so that was where he crafted his whole idea about, a philosopher king. He traveled to Egypt, studied there. and a bunch of other places. And then when he had come back, he had spent some time in. Go ahead.
I was going to say, was Alexandria a thing at that point? Like the great libraries and all that? All right.
Alexandria itself is a thing because of his student, Aristotle. Well, I mean, not directly. Aristotle was Alexander's tutor.
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, Alexander the Great was Aristotle's pupil.
Right.
Alexander was his patron.
Yeah. And that was that was closer to like the 200s.
Plato was already dead. No, it was like, I don't know when Alexandria became like a full-on library. There's probably already some stuff there. There was really famous Egyptian places, and he went to those, and I forgot their name now.
Okay.
And he learned a lot, so he kind of absorbed all this stuff from the world, And the Egyptians were pretty, they have like at the time it was still like several thousand years of history, right? So those were, I think, formative years. But he comes back and he kind of has this weird back and forth thing with the king of Syracuse. So he had tutored while he was in Syracuse. The king at the time, I think his brother, and really liked him. And then, that guy's nephew became the next king. And then they wanted him to tutor Plato, but all this shit kept happening and didn't work out. Plato goes, gets banned from the city. He tries to go again. And this time, at first the guy was like, I want you to come back. I changed my mind. Sorry, come back and please teach me. And so he comes back, and then it was like the third time, actually, I think that he'd been there. So then he banishes him again, but this time he fucked him over because, he sent him they were at war with Athens, I think, or with Sparta. He sent him specifically to a place that was controlled by Sparta, where the rule was, the rule was if any Athenian, or Athenian supporters land there, that they get sold into slavery immediately. And so he was sold into slavery.
I'm sure he didn't know that was going to happen, right? There's no way.
It's like, they actually sent him letters and were like, please come back. You know what I mean? And and he's like, okay, I'll come back. Because he wanted to make a philosopher king. That was his whole thing, right?
Yeah.
He was like, we can do this. But luckily enough, one of the people who was there at the slave auction knew who he was and did not, and bought him, right? Like paid the ransom for him. And then he goes back to Athens, right? So all of his friends, out of, generosity, they wanted to pay this guy back. So they all raised, which was a lot of money because it was really expensive. So they raised all this money to give this guy back the money. And he goes, no, I don't want the money. I'm just going to do it. You're not the only ones that can look after Plato. I want to support him. And so then they took all of that money and they bought the academy. And that's how the first academy was founded.
Dang, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. It was like 20 or 30 minas, which I'm not sure how much that is now, but it's like a small fortune, I think.
Yeah.
And so, so he bought like the gymnasium area and the Olive Grove area. That was the academy. It's not like what you're thinking. It's not like a building. There were houses where students would stay. And then there was an open gymnasium, wrestling pits, like an eating area. There was
I'm glad you're clarifying, because when I picture it in my head, it's mostly like whatever tile I would put down in like Civ 5 or something, It'd be like gymnasium, academy of sciences. And it would always just look like, well, actually kind of like that. So not too bad. Yeah.
And they had like a sacred olive grove. Technically, actually, his academy, this is kind of funny. His academy technically would have been a cult because they had a shrine to the Muses.
Okay.
And so literally they would have been seen as like worshiping the Muses,
Everybody's worshiping something, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I like it. I like the Muses. I think it's great. But it was like inspiration, right? And they were artists and philosophers and scientists, and like they inspire you, And so that was the whole thing. And his whole thing was really shaped around rhetoric and speaking and dialogue and talking, right? And he's doing that for a while, and he actually ends up, I think, going back to Syracuse at some point, which is funny. But anyways, so he's back. When he got back that time, Aristotle was there, and Aristotle was the son of a doctor, and he was a very good doctor, very popular, famous doctor who was So Philip II is Alexander the Great's father. Okay. Now Philip's father, his court physician was Aristotle's dad. Okay.
Gotcha.
So Aristotle's dad is the court physician for the Macedonian king.
Got it.
Aristotle's his son, so he grew up with medicine. And he goes to study at Plato's Academy because that's like the greatest place in the world to be, right, for learning. Yeah. And so he goes there, and he's sort of the star guy there. Like he's the smartest one in the room. He's sort of the opposite of Plato. Like he didn't spend as much time like in rhetoric and arguing, and rhetoric would be like talking, you know? Whereas he was more of a bookworm kind of guy. He actually, his nickname, I forgot what it was now, but it like what Plato called him basically meant that he's reading books all the time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And then also, and then also that he would argue a lot. Not with like rhetoric,
God.
But
he was a nerd. Okay.
Yeah.
She's like, actually, yeah.
So there was a lot of, I think he had a good relation. It's not clear. Like, I think he loved Plato. It seemed like they had a good relationship, and they were around each other for a long period of time, for like 14 years or so, I think, before Plato died. No, longer than that. So I think Aristotle was pretty young, and then Plato died when Aristotle was like in his late 30s. And so they knew each other pretty well. Yeah. Aristotle apparently did support Plato's idea of forms. So I forgot to mention what Plato's idea of forms is. Plato had this idea that that to solve this issue that had cropped up where people are like, everything is change. And then someone else had this idea where everything is one thing and it's just solid and it's never moving and it's perfection. And we just had to sort of have this illusion. And they were debating this idea. And so Plato had worked out over years this idea of Platonic forms, of this perfected realm of perfect things, right? And they project out into reality. Mm-hmm. And so let me give you an example. So like in the Platonic realm, there's a horse and it's the perfect horse. And every other horse that you see is a projection, a distortion of that perfection of the horse.
Okay. I see where they're coming from, right?
Yeah.
It's like we have a template, we have a blueprint for horse. It's like just make a bunch of copies, send them down. They're not all going to be like this, but
his argument was like you can look at all the horses in the world, but you'll never understand the horse itself, right? And like you're not going to capture that horse.
Well, then hold on. So how does that relate to man-made stuff like a cup, right? Because you're like, is this like a stone? A perfect stone that I've molded into a cup, or is there like a Platonic perfect
I think
cup?
So. Yeah. Well, it had a lot to do with geometry. So Plato was really into geometry. This was actually before Euclid. So keep that in mind that we're like pre-Euclid's elements here. But they had Platonic solids, like all those shapes, 3D shapes.
Yeah, fundamental shapes, right? Yeah.
So it had a lot to do with geometry, and I'm not a geometer, but so I can't explain what all of his geometric positions were, but he thought that like geometry itself was perfect, but like let's say I try to draw a triangle, it won't be perfect, right? But the triangle itself is. And there was some meaning in there. There was like that was it. Like he thought that geometry was the exploration of this perfected realm, right? And so it had a lot to do with that. And I'm not an expert on forms. There's actually a modern guy who's really into Plato's ideas. And he's on YouTube a lot. I forgot. I've never watched any of his videos because I don't want his ideas to influence me.
You don't want to poison the well.
Yeah. Well, I don't. It's like I know what the argument is, and I totally get it. And actually, I have views that are even maybe somewhat similar. But I'm just I like having my own ideas. But one thing I am interested in is figuring out what people actually believed, and so I understand like. Once I can figure out where someone's making some assumption somewhere, that's where I kind of end. And so Plato is assuming that there's this perfected realm, right, that projects out into this one. And I just see where his whole framework is. Now, I don't really need to know all the minutia of how he builds that out because I understand that he didn't find some golden truth that I can like, oh, there it is, right? Like, it was like
it's definitely not going to be buried within halfway through a foundational work, right? It's going to be the first thing, right?
Yeah, you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And then, which isn't bad. I'm just, it's perfectly fine. But so Aristotle had, was in the school of forms, right? And so he actually wrote something about it too. So he had defended it at one point. And so he was probably, I think during Plato's lifetime, probably a fan of it. But he had rivals in that school and not everybody liked him. And Plato died. He was basically passed up for leadership. And then he kind of went, is that when he went to exile? He didn't go in exile, but he left, right? And he went to another place and he started studying there. And I think he was tutoring people. And then he started, actually, what's really cool is he had figured out that there was like a reproductive part of an octopus arm that people still didn't agree with until the 19th century when they found out that it was true.
A reproductive part?
Yeah. I was like, I don't know exactly what the detail is. He was really into animals. That was his big thing.
Apparently.
He was really into animals and he liked.
I want to understand how this thing reproduces.
Yeah.
I think it's in the arm.
He was a huge fan of anatomy and animals and categorizing things and figuring things out.
Which I guess would also kind of play into, because if you're looking for like support for perfect forms, you probably want to see if you can find anything in nature that mimics somehow that kind of idea, right? So
probably.
I know a lot of botanists, go that way, right? But anyway.
Aristotle's main guy who took over the his academy. It wasn't called the academy; it was called the Lyceum. I don't know if I'm saying any of these names right. I'm not Greek, so
I have heard Lyceum verbatim. So
he was the first botanist and proper.
Oh, okay.
Whereas like Aristotle was like the animal guy, he was like the plant guy. But anyways, he had started to question. I think Platonic forms a lot, maybe before that. I can't really tell, but I do know that suddenly he sort of had a lot of ideas about empiricism. And he goes, to hell with all the fucking ideas about things we can't perceive. We should base our thinking on what we know is real. Right. And that was sort of his whole approach, right? Which makes a lot of sense. Yep. And I'm not saying it was wrong. Actually, it was just incredibly good timing because it's like science really kind of took off from there, right? And so Western thought went in that direction. And so if you look up, history books, they'll credit Aristotle as like being the father of science. I mean, science was around before him, but he definitely created this logical realism, the Aristotelian realism. Let's call it that. That's okay. I don't know if that's the actual name. I don't have any taste for actual philosophical writing. Mostly,
sure.
I really just want to know what the ideas are.
Yeah. No, I get that. People get so hung up on like specific names for definitions and stuff. And it's like, well, okay, can you talk about the concept of what you're trying to explain? And then who cares the exact thing that you call it by, right? Like, I don't know. I don't think there's power in that, but that's just me. So
Aristotle probably would have disagreed. He'd have been like, nope, we need exact. He was all about definition. He's like, if you don't define it.
Yeah, he was a nerd.
Yeah.
I love that idea in my head. I'm never going to forget that. It's just a nerd.
So he, at some point in his career, he came out with, his different books on what he had thought. And it boils down to, he thinks that you should base everything on what is obviously real, right? And so it's the form of something that has all of the meaning, and the meaning shows you what it's like. What it does gives you the meaning. And so he had thought that everything existed. He had a concept for how the soul worked. And there's all these little fine details of how he builds everything out. But what struck me when I was first researching his ideas, and I've been into Aristotle and Plato and Socrates since I was a kid, right? Yeah. But I had never like formalized my understanding on their works until I was an adult. but what I realized is what Aristotle was doing. Oh, and I also don't read other philosophers' opinions about these people. You know what I mean? Like I don't go
just
and
get it
like
right from the source. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I try to figure out like, so he kept like, when I was reading, he kept like referencing, you know, like what seemed to be like self-evident truths. And then I finally figured out that he had started, I finally found where he started. It was the law of non-contradiction, right? What we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And so he starts there, and his entire framework and how he bases everything is more or less that there are some things that have to be true, right? And you can't prove that they're true. And if you try, you have to use the law of non-contradiction to show that they're either true or false. And so this law of non-contradiction has to be the most true thing, right? Okay. And so then he starts there and he builds everything else out. And so once I figured that out, I'm like, okay, so he's assuming that then.
Yeah.
That was an assumption that he wasn't aware of. Mm-hmm. He thought from a very reasonable perspective that was so obvious it had to be true, which I think most of us would make the same mistake. When I first heard it, I like was sitting there and I'm like, fuck, how is that not true?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I'm like, he's got to be right there. That has to be true. But then over time, I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah, but that's with everything, right? It takes more effort to decide how something is not aligned than to observe it as aligned, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. That's it's okay. You're normal. You're you're a regular boy.
Yeah. And he tutored Alexander the Great, who went on to conquer the world, literally. And he was sort of Alexander was sort of his patron, and he had taken over. He built the Lyceum, and the Macedonians would send him things that they would find, like animals and things like that, and he would study them. And he was supported by Alexander. When Alexander died, Aristotle was in a lot of hot water because a lot of people didn't like Alexander, and they didn't like the fact that Aristotle had, been his guy. And so he actually famously quoted, I'm not going to let the Athenians make the same mistake twice, as in killing Socrates and then killing him. And so he left in exile, but then he died shortly after that, like a year later.
So it's kind of I am noticing a common theme of, and I'm going to assume it's going to be like this until like the 1700s, but guilty by association is pretty rough in the old days. It was like, oh, you guys hung out, and guess what? You can go die with him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always kind of like, I think it's hard to determine like where the next really big step is, because that foundation of modern science really lays on this classical logical perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone had kind of just rested on that, and everyone else sort of, they go off in different directions, and they make a lot of other assumptions that they feel like are so true they should have to be true. And mostly people think that they're rescuing something. All of it's well-timed. All of it's like okay, this is a good time for this. And it leads us into new things, and we discover things, and it never killed science. But I think we're at the end of a road here now, and we still have these classical senses of logic and a classical sense of physics that don't hold in reality. From our own experience, you can prove it, right? You could prove it to yourself. And I think they're stifling. And if you look at like the modern university, for one, despite any of the, assumptions, the unaddressed assumptions that they're making, if you would have shown what a modern university is to Aristotle or Socrates or Plato, well, not Socrates. Socrates wouldn't have liked any of it, but Plato and Aristotle would have been like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
They probably would have been really appreciative of all the things that we've learned. But I don't think that they would like the structure. I think that they would probably find it nonsense.
Yeah, they'd probably be like, you used this to find the stuff? Or did that happen first and now you're doing this? Like, this ain't good.
Yeah. So they would probably see. So their idea of what a school was, a schole, was a place where people who didn't need to work could go and talk about, things that weren't important.
Yeah.
They were just fun. They did think that it was important, but it wasn't like, they spent a lot of time working on philosophy and politics and thinking about these things and talking about it, but they had the luxury to not need to work with their hands. And so the whole school means leisure, means a place of leisure. And so that was just a place where, hey, come on in. We're just fucking, we're digging into some stuff. And you had to defend your ideas. You had to talk about stuff. You had, it was like a lot of rhetoric, a lot of, Aristotle's place was more of like, you can imagine pictures, charts of anatomy and maps and scrolls. And, that was a lot more of like what his place was like. And Plato was more of like, you would have someone arguing in front of a crowd, and then the students would be going back and forth, and, and people would be working things out that way. And then you have like a couple groups in the sand drawing geometry and arguing about it.
Yeah.
That's what, and then, two groups over there wrestling, having a wrestling match, a couple guys running around the track, that's what yeah.
Yeah. I get, I mean, I love it. Honestly, it sounds like the perfect kind of place to hang out, dude. It's like, it's like what I want the YMCA to be, but it's not.
Yeah. It's what I wanted university to be when I got there. I thought it was going to be like that.
I don't know. I've only ever been to community colleges and in online schools, so I never really had
it's not like that. The tutor room is kind of like that. So I had a great time tutoring.
You could run labs in the tutor room?
Oh, no, but
no,
but it was like, everybody was dialoguing a lot, and there was a lot of discussion. And I think that's what most people actually like about academia, is when things like that can happen. It's not so much like the lectures.
That's a good point, because I was also like a math tutor for a while and stuff. And that was kind of always the place where, because your goal in that scenario is to get someone to actually think about something and understand it and know how to apply things, right? And so to do that, you really do have to have a conversation, right? And explore ideas. You can't just stare at a formula for 2 hours and be like, I get this is when I use this for the rest of my life. I don't know why, but no, I get that. I think it's good.
Yeah, but you can try telling them a bunch of stuff. It won't work.
No, you got to pull it out of them. Yeah. Anyway, what were we? Sorry, we got off on tangent talking about it's fun to be at the gym.
And that's how you can rescue modern science, is that we kind of like say, okay, we're not going to say that something is necessarily absolutely true. You kind of just have to let that go, and we have degrees of, that's one way. There's a couple of other ways around it, where if you just sort of, if you have a logical error somewhere where something is both true and false, you sort of take that off to the side and arbitrage it. And you're like, okay, we're going to come back to that later. Move on. This is what they do in computer science. And so, in computer science, if you have like a table or something, and you have a table lookup, and then an item ends up being two things, then it's like it's like a doctor's patient readout, and it's like, does patient have allergies? And it ends up somebody messes it up, and you have yes and no in there, right?
Right.
And so in computers, you just have algorithms like sort of just like, okay, we're gonna look at you later. So it doesn't crash everything.
All right, if we put him in a room with some pollen and we close the door, he's in a superposition of choking on his tongue and not, right? Yeah. No, I get that. I do wonder, do you know when this might be irrelevant, but you were talking about the cup being red, and it made me think about light and composition, right? Because this was at a time before they were doing things like splitting light beams into colors and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just wonder, because they had this idea of perfect forms and all that, but I feel like the idea of composition would have just broken all that, because as soon as you start breaking things down into more fundamental parts, right?
Yeah.
They can either say, well, the thing I thought was perfect before is actually made up of these little perfect things, right? But it's like, where do you stop with that?
Well,
right?
they had atomists. That's where the concept of atom came from. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think Aristotle or Plato took them very seriously.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure of what their views were on the atomists, but they had people that had thought of the concept of an atom and that everything was made from these atoms. That's where we get the term atom.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. That's all from Greek thought. Like a lot of Western science comes just from, Greek thought.
Yeah.
It really is the bedrock. Yeah. Not that they were the only ones. I mean, there was a lot of really important people in like the Arab world, for example. They had like a whole golden era with mathematics mostly. They didn't like a lot of, I think it was Aristotle, or it could have been Plato. I think Aristotle. Aristotle thought that the light actually came from our eyes and it was projected to the thing. And so that was how you would see things.
Yeah. I wish, man.
Yeah. And they totally, this one Arab guy, I forgot his name now, but he was like, I hate this. And so he ended up building the first, it's what the technology that cameras are based on, actually. So you have a tiny little hole, and then you have light that passes through that hole, and then it'll project on, if the room is dark enough, it'll project onto the opposite wall.
Yeah.
But upside down. Yeah. Right. And so he made one of those. I forgot what it's called now. Actually, my kids just made one a while ago when they were learning how cameras work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And cool. So it flips the image upside down. He proved that basically like light is traveling, it's like from the sun, basically. It's like a light ray from the sun. It's not our eyes are doing this thing,
How would he explain darkness then?
That's a whole philosophical thing. I don't know personally what his philosophy was, but that's
we don't have to get super granular into it, but it just seems like a wild concept to be like
most philosophy doesn't try to, from what I know, which I'm not a philosopher, but in all of the frameworks that I've looked at and I know about, people don't really try to address physical phenomena first, or even really a lot, Yeah. Now Aristotle and Plato did obviously a lot, but they also were very, they're not like a modern scientist. And so they had like implicit ideas of, I think like the gods still, inherent to their thinking, not like literal Greek gods. I don't think they did. In fact, Aristotle, I think, was his accusation was that he didn't believe in gods or whatever, when they were going to, when he was exiled. But, so light and darkness, that's an interesting one. There's a lot of different schools of thought on that. Like Christianity, for example, has, the world was in a void. And so there was no light. Right. And so everything would, I guess, in that sense, would start in darkness. And that it's like light is sort of like this force that fights. I think our modern sense of like light and dark, and as far as like forces go, has a lot to do with Zoroastrianism. And they had this they had a dualism where God wasn't one God, it was two things, and you have light and dark. And so there's fundamentally two things fighting each other. I don't think Aristotle has much more. Because everything else is just built from there. And then, there was a bunch of medieval thinkers that are probably worth talking about. There's scientists like, Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler. Another big thing that is going to come up pretty quickly is that, and I mentioned it with Aristotle, is that everyone was looking for meaning. And that meaning was not absent in what they were doing. And like Kepler, for example, he was trying to show that the universe was operating in perfect harmony, like the planets were harmonics, and that basically would describe like the music of God, And he was actually devastated when his measurements didn't turn out to be perfect circles.
No, I get it, dude.
Because like, damn it, just wasted all this time.
But it would have been huge if it was true, right? Like, how nice would it have been if everything just turned out to be just an extrapolation of like a fundamental idea, right? Just everything. That'd be great. But yeah. So, well.
Newton was a fucking actual fucking wizard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Still fuck with Newton. He's good.
Yeah.
So working up. So after Newton, 1600s, right?
Yeah, very late 1600s.
Yeah.
It's like 1690 something.
Gotcha.
But he was an alchemist, and he spent most of his time doing alchemy.
Is that true?
Yeah. I'm literally saying he's an actual fucking wizard.
No way. I didn't know that.
His main thing was alchemy.
How has this never come up in anything I've ever...
People don't look at his real life.
I guess.
We like the mythology of science, not the literal truth. It doesn't fit very well with the narrative. Newton didn't even like his theory of gravity.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He thought it was... he didn't like invoking action at a distance. He thought that it was like he's saying a ghost is doing it. Right. And he had been ridiculed earlier in his career by Hooke, Robert Hooke, like Hooke's Law, that guy.
It's the one he made microscopes, right? In Springs.
He might have. I think he discovered the cell, and he gave it that name.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know I think he named the cell, and I think he might have done it with a microscope, but. Optics was pretty big at the time. They were really everybody was really into optics, which they all would have seen as like the exploration of God's universe. Right. And they were literally trying to derive what the meaning of it was from like a perspective of God giving that. Now, not everyone. That's sort of like there's a thing that you can watch happen over time. So a part of this is like there's a mythology of science that's not true, where we tell stories retrospectively to fit a narrative of what we think science is, and a lot of it is far more messy, and a lot of it's accidents, and a lot of it is mystical, very mystical. In fact, almost always. Any major breakthrough has a very heavy mystical element to it. Like Einstein just lived in an imagination factory all fucking day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's that. So there's like, there's the mythology that needs to be, we could just see what's actually there, what actually happened. Like Isaac Newton was a smart boy. They paid for him to go to a nicer school. And then when he got older, he went to Oxford or Cambridge or whatever it was. And he studied there. He got a master's degree. All of his major breakthroughs happened when they shut the school down and he had to go back home for 2 years because there was a plague outbreak in England. And so he had to stay home for a couple of years. And that was when he invented calculus and wrote down the laws of motion. Because he was like trying to figure shit out in his head, just playing around in his own house, doing farm chores part of the day. And then the rest of the day, he would just sit there and think. He would work on optics a lot. The guy would sit here and go like this, make a prism with the beam of light coming through the window. And then he would take a needle and poke his eye with the beam of light coming right into his eye, because he was trying to figure out if his eye had something to do with what was happening. If it had something to do with the amount of pressure being put on his eyeball. So he literally poked his own, the circle part on the inside.
Yeah.
He poked that with a quill.
His pupil?
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. I mean, not enough to break it, but he would put pressure on it.
Yeah.
And he was just do stuff like that. Right. He was a really interesting little boy. Like he would make, made a little, like a bike, like a little cart thing for himself. And he would like drive it around and everyone's like, what the fuck? He was obsessed with time. He loved making clocks, but the sundials.
Okay.
And he kind of got taken in by the apothecary, right? Which would have had a lot to do with alchemy, I think, at the time. I think there would have been an element of alchemy going on.
Yeah.
Because a lot of an apothecary would have like different medicine stuff. That medicine would have been alchemical stuff, I think, at the time. Yeah. I actually have never double checked that. but I've read a couple of biographies of him, and I know that he was in the apothecary, and he later became obsessed with alchemy for most of the rest of his career. After like some point, he spent like almost all the books he wrote are on alchemy, like most of them.
That's so crazy.
He wasn't like so upfront about it, but alchemy wasn't looked at harshly at the time, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't as taboo at the time, and so it was somewhat respectable. I don't think he spent a bunch of time talking about it publicly, but he definitely wrote a lot about it in his own work. But he had come up with these ideas, in his early 20s, while he was on vacation at home. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't even want to tell anybody. And a friend of his, he finally told him, right? They were debating about the motion of the planets. And he's like, "Oh, I solved that like 10 years ago." And his friend's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I got it in some book somewhere. I figured it out. I know how it works." And he's like, "Are you serious?" And so he goes and looks and he gets his old book and he's like, "Oh my God, you did." And then he also had figured out calculus, right? And he could solve these problems, and people weren't exactly sure how he was solving all these problems. And he would just like vaguely hint at like things in some of his papers. And people were like, his friend was like, "Look, you have to share this, right?
Yeah.
You just have to show." And he was like, no, I don't want to be embarrassed, because he didn't want to be criticized for this. I think he was mostly worried about this strange action at a distance, because it would seem like something was like pushing these things into each other, right?
And he couldn't explain what it was, right? Physics
mostly at the time would have been mostly interactions, like things hitting each other, bouncing, or being launched, or being shot, or fall, or so it wasn't like they didn't know, not fall, but he didn't know how to treat it, right, without looking kind of silly just saying that. Yeah, it's just like magic, right? But what his actual idea, how he actually rationalized it in his mind, is that he had thought, because he had done some math, and he thought that the universe would get out of sync at some point, like the planets wouldn't work right at some point. And so he was like, well, since my equations suggest that this won't work in the long run, God must be fixing things. And so the universe is a clock, and God keeps it in time, because he comes in as the clockmaker and winds it up and makes sure everything's okay. Yep. And that must be happening, or else this wouldn't work. That was what he actually thought about his theory. He did not want to publish it. And his friend is the one, I forgot his friend's name. He was an important guy. His friend was the one who encouraged him to do it. And it actually created a debate, because he published all of his stuff on calculus after Leibniz had, right? And so Leibniz had done the same thing, the same kind of math, right? But years before Newton published. And then it became a big debate between the two of them. And that was like a whole thing.
So Newton did it like 10 years prior.
Oh, Leibniz, he had done it decades before, yeah. I just said 10 years. That was just a random thing I said.
Oh, okay.
It was like decades before that, yeah.
So he's got the receipts then. You can just pull it out and be like, I was doing this. Yeah.
He did, yeah, but it was still a debate. Leibniz never really cared about it. Like initially, Leibniz didn't care. Leibniz was like, "Look, I published this. This was my idea." People were accusing him of stealing it from Newton.
Got it.
And he's like, "I published it. I've never seen Newton's stuff. Like, I published mine years before him." And they were like, "No, you saw his paper when you went to London." He's like, "I wasn't even a mathematician when I saw that paper."
Yeah,
he's like, and Newton didn't explain it in the paper. Like, it was just, he used it. And they were like, "You saw that, and then you informed your own thinking later, and then so you took it from Newton." And so it was this huge thing. And then Newton became a little vicious, or Leibniz became more vicious about it, right? Because he was being attacked. And so then it became a back and forth thing. And unfortunately for Leibniz, when they made like the final decision that sort of quashed the whole thing, it was done by the president of the Royal Society, who was Newton.
Oh shit. Well, yeah.
Newton had this thing about him. When he became president of the Royal Society, he took the only existing image of Robert Hooke and threw it in the fire. Now, we don't know that to be 100% true, but it was definitely gone right when he became president.
Well, he believed in alchemy, right? So it wasn't really gone. It was just transformed or something, right?
Yeah, so his work on alchemy, he spent, I want to say like half of his career his total like years in science. He spent like half of it working in alchemy. He had done a lot of things too. So he was like the Lord of the Mint. So he was like in charge of like the English money, for a while.
Man, it's a good title. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I might be saying it wrong. I'm Lord of whatever, but it's like Lord of the Mint.
Now.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he was president of the Royal Society. So he was like considered like, the greatest scientist in the world. Yeah. Leibniz, unfortunately, ended up dying destitute, although he had lived, I think, pretty well. I'm a big fan of Leibniz. He invented binary code. He was brilliant. We use his notation for calculus now. We don't use Newton's because his is easier to use. And, just he was a philosopher. He actually had an idea that's just basically the same idea as Donald Hoffman has, which is the one I like now. He had this idea of monads because he had shown that like in his philosophy, he's like, you can't, he goes, let's say everything's a machine, right? And you just blow this thing. So it's like a windmill. He uses this windmill as an example. I think you just blow this windmill up and then we're looking in the mind and the mind is working like the windmill. And I'm in the windmill of the mind. Where is consciousness? Where is it?
Sure. Yeah.
Is it in this gear? Is it in that cog? Is it over here? Where is it? He goes, you can't find it. You can't find consciousness in a machine. And so he was like, we're just not going to be able to do this. And so I don't think that the world is made up of this machine. I think it's made up of these monads, these units of consciousness, like these tiny little units of consciousness. And the monads are what's making all of this. And you have to start. So basically he built a framework and he started with consciousness. Beautiful idea. I really liked it. And that's actually Donald Hoffman references him a lot because he's like, my idea isn't even new. This is old, and he points to Leibniz. The idea is even much older than that. But, there's Eastern stuff that's way older. But
sure.
Yeah. But so anyways, there was this whole feud and then Newton wins, obviously. Leibniz sort of peters out. And I think he was completely broke by the time he died. And it was actually really sad for him. But damn. Yeah, they had both invented calculus. Yeah. Really kind of a shame.
Yeah. Well,
both brilliant guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at least he wrote his stuff down,
Yeah.
So,
well, he was famous during his life. And actually a lot of the fight was because he had like someone who was involved in, I forgot the guy's name now. I actually wrote a paper about this a long time ago in college because I really like these guys, and it was really his friend who kept like egging him on. And he's like, you gonna take that shit? You know what I mean?
It's always the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always that one dude, man.
And Leibniz is like, no, I'm not going to take that shit. And it was really stupid. But
yeah.
But his alchemy, Newton was trying to make the Philosopher's Stone. He had all kinds of recipes. He wrote about it a lot. He worked on it a lot. That was his thing. So he was an alchemist trying to create the Philosopher's Stone, right?
I mean, if you're going to be an alchemist and the best scientist in the world,
yeah,
kind of have to, right?
Right. So we'd like to take that part out and kind of ignore the fact that that's like, that he wasn't like that he didn't even like his own theory, and that he thought that God was a clockmaker. We want to ignore that, but that's what he truly believed. It was deeply. I mean, I think that all of these people are sort of exceptions. I don't think any of them were like super religious in like the I believe every single word the Bible says kind of context, but also Newton kind of did, though. He wrote a lot about Bible prophecy. So he was pretty into that too. Yeah. But I don't think he would be like, the reason he kept quiet about a lot of it actually wasn't even so much that it was alchemy. It wasn't so much that it was about Bible prophecy. He was not a Trinitarian. And so he didn't believe in the Trinity, the Holy Trinity.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Huh. And so he was kind of quiet about that. And he didn't really want to, because I believe the view of the English church or the Church of England or whatever it was, I believe the view is the Holy Trinity. They believe in the Holy Trinity because it's basically the Catholic Church, but they had just split apart. So that way the king could get divorced at some point. Yeah.
The C of whatever. Yeah. CV. Yeah. One, I didn't really realize that was a up for grabs part that you could just be like, I didn't realize that people back in the day were picky and choosy about specifics about the Bible. But
oh yeah, well, that's not even in the Bible, but yeah, theology, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the other thing I was going to say? It was oh man, it was about Newton, obviously.
Yeah, that kind of stuff could get you killed.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of contention, and they would kind of.
I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't have killed him, but
yeah. But I know there were no strangers to kind of rephrasing or rewriting or taking books out or putting books in. Well, I guess they didn't really put books in, but anyway, as far as Newton goes, did he think that his calculations didn't work out? Was this a problem of like hidden bodies influencing orbital patterns that we just didn't know about yet? Was it one of those things, or was it?
I don't know that the literal ground truth of what he was talking about when he says that he thought that everything would fall apart. He thought that they were being pushed. I think little pushes were pushing them together, and eventually that was going to fail. I'm not sure exactly why he thought that, but you can't do three bodies anyways. So there's the 3-body problem. You've heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't solve orbital motion for more than 2 bodies. So I think there's a long, I've never actually looked into like Kepler's those measurements to functions. I believe that just got them. And then I think Newton was able to describe each one. Well, I know how I could know how you can get Newton's math to show you the orbit of a planet, right? But you do it for one planet at a time. You know what I mean? You don't do it for so you can solve it generally for a planet. You get elliptical orbits. That's what you get no matter what. Yeah. I don't know how you can't do 3 bodies though.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it that you can't do 3 bodies, or you can't do 3 bodies of similar mass?
Yeah. Well, I think you just kind of have a 2-body approximation in each case.
That's what you do.
And you just say the other ones don't really matter because they're so small, but they do a little bit, right? In reality, they do, and it does matter, and it's like it does affect things a bit, right? Yeah. It's not like the moon is really small, but it affects us quite a bit.
Yeah, and over a long enough period of time, it'll have a noticeable impact, right?
Yeah. But if you try to take 3 bodies orbiting each other, you can't do the math. You can't solve it analytically. You can simulate it. We have simulations that can, draw out some trajectory, but it's not deterministic. It becomes probabilistic. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's even like a good hint that nobody picked up on. But so he was worried that it would collapse. And I forgot what the literal argument was there. But he was worried that it would mean that not worried. He just saw that it would collapse, or it was his opinion that it would, and that God must be coming in to fix it. Which made sense to him, I think, a lot, right? Because why wouldn't that make sense? It's like, yeah, of course, God's going to come in and fix it.
Yeah. My math is obviously correct. So,
well, I think he would have said, it's funny, as I just have this opinion that if we showed Newton modern day science and modern day physics, and we said, look, here's Einstein's ideas that came after yours, and he fixed all these problems, he'd have been like, oh, great, that's amazing. And then we'd be like, but look, it doesn't work when we look at these galaxies. And you go, that's because it's not right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go, something's wrong with your math.
Yeah.
He might say like, oh, but God's fixing it. But at the same time,
I was a little worried about that. Yeah. It's like,
but at the same time, he'd probably be like, your model's off. You know what I mean?
I think even he would have the wherewithal to be like, well, if someone could come in and fix my God fixing mistake, then I'm sure another person can come in and fix this God fixing mistake. Right.
Yeah.
I would hope, but
there was like this, at some point we started lacking the humility that we didn't truly understand how the universe worked. Right. And you can see the signs, because in modern day science, we're like, our theories don't work. And it's like, I think a lot of scientists, if they had the same problems with the theories, they'd be like, of course it doesn't work. Like, you haven't figured out the answer yet. It's just like, you have a really good model. I think that would have been obvious to some people at some points in time, because they would have this sense that we're humans and that we're living in a universe that was made. They would feel like it was made by God or something. You know what I mean? And so they would have this sense that we're not going to probably figure all of it out. And we're trying to discover God's universe, Let
me ask you this. Around what time, you might not know, but did governments start getting heavily involved with like funding and results of scientific discoveries, right? Because I feel
like in modern science.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of this pressure to have like a correct answer and stuff like that, or always kind of be surprised that things aren't working or have an explanation or kind of always compromising. I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that if you don't put out something, then you're not going to get money to continue doing science, right?
It's called publish or perish now.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. You have to, I mean, people see numbers, not quality. So you need to publish a lot of papers. That's the idea.
That's so stupid, dude.
Yeah.
It's
a real problem in science. It's a huge problem. That particular thing. So I think, it's sort of complicated to say because like science, I think as a pursuit has always been funded by people wealthier, right? It's sort of like an art in that sense. It's like, it's always been funded by others. Not always. A lot of it is self-funded. If you look historically, most scientists that you would call a scientist now were just people who had enough money that they didn't have to work and they would play around with things in their basement,
Yeah.
And it worked really well. There's actually an argument now, which I agree with, I think, is that science has become literally institutionalized. But number two, I think everyone's trapped and terrified and they're afraid to be wrong. And it's like, we just don't need to be like that.
Yeah.
And nobody was right. They're all wrong. And it's okay to explore. In fact, that's what they all were doing. And that's how we got to where we are now.
Yeah. Super useful to, don't say don't do it or anything, it's, this is all, it's all helpful, even if it is wrong, Yeah. It's fun. But
move forward and play around and be okay. There's nothing holding anyone back. Nobody knows anything. I don't know anything. I know I don't. Yeah. Like I'm painfully aware that I don't know anything and it scares me sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I truly don't know. Now that doesn't mean that I don't. I think that there's a balance. There's a way to hold an intent. There's a way to hold an intent without being attached to the outcome, but still holding it. And there's a way to allow yourself certainty and to let go of humility without entirely abandoning it, And so I'll take for certainty that I don't think that this is it, right? And I think that the world, the universe, everything, reality is fundamentally consciousness. I'll take that as a certainty in my beliefs, in my existence, but I still hold humility that I don't know what that means. You know what I mean?
Justin, are you trying to tell people to live their truth?
Yes. But it's different. So it's like, I think live your truth means that you can go ahead and decide to follow some thought that I'm not going to like about it. Like I'm not going to like what you think. But here's the thing is your thoughts are wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's missing the humility part, right?
Yeah. You don't believe any of your thoughts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Your thoughts are certainly wrong. If anything is certain, it's that is certainly wrong. And so you can see that even when I'm trying to say this stuff, like I'm still using some form of a logical system from my own perspective, right? Because to say certain implies that I have a logical system, right? Or else I couldn't say it. I do have one. It's not classical. But yeah, I think that you have to step into the game or else you don't do anything. And so you can just sit there on a rock for your entire life meditating and that's fine. Right. Or you can do something, and there's nothing wrong with either. Right. And so, but there's a way to do that without thinking that this one was the right choice and that one was the wrong choice. And this should have happened. That shouldn't have happened. And this is truth and that's not truth. And, to me, that's sort of this when you dogmatically, and I don't even like that. Like when you try to say something is certain, like this is it. This is the absolute truth. And I know it to be completely true to the extent that I don't allow you any room You know what I mean? That's sort of like kind of topples everything down, because now what's going to happen is if I think that I know what's best, given my framework of truth, now I can follow some logical path to knowing what's best to do. I know for certain that you need to sit there and listen to me for an hour, and then I will grade you on how well you answer questions that I give you, because I know for certain that this is the truth. And so I'm allowed to do this now. This makes total sense. I'm right. I'm the truth. You got to listen to this, and I can show you. And I use science to show you that it's true. Before that, I use Jesus. I use a Bible. I use whatever. I use a political ideology, right? And so anytime you step into that, you just sort of discard everything else. And so I think there's a better way, right? I think if you looked at have you ever read the words of Jesus? Like literally, like what he actually said?
The ones in red? Yeah.
Yeah. He was not.
Well, obviously a translation, but you know.
Yeah. I've never read Aramaic either. I don't know what he was. It's not like those were his actual somebody's writing about it a while later, right? But he was not a Christian.
No. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. No. And so it's like he was a mystic, very literal mystic that actually says a lot of things like believe it and you shall have it. I mean, that's something that a modern day spiritual person would say, right?
Yeah.
That's the law of attraction. And so, other things like that. So anyways, I'm not saying that, I understand it all or anything, but I'm just saying that when you step into some certainty that like, oh, this is true. And so what have we done with science? We have said, what did Aristotle do? Oh, this law of non-contradiction. This is true. I can start now. I can now build out a framework that's perfect. Right. And you have to agree with me because this is obviously true. And now I have the truth. And then someone else is like, I don't like that. And they're like, oh, fuck you. And then they start fighting. Right. Yeah. And then that's what all of it is. So it doesn't really matter. So to me, the mistake is to think that you have some truth that's certain and without holding it with some humility. Right. And I think that consciousness is fundamental. I am very clear. I don't know what that actually means. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't know what that means. I'm being honest. Like, I literally don't know what that means.
Sure. Yeah.
I will allow myself a certainty, right? Like, I'll play a game, and because that's how you do things, right? That's the getting off of the rock and going and doing something. It's like, I'm going to now take on this false certainty that the ground is under my feet, right? Without positing that I understand everything about it. But I'm going to play this game. And that's what I think that we should be allowed to do. It's like, let's play the game. Let's take on a certainty, but holding the humility that we don't actually know. And that's okay. And I like to just be with what's there, like what's in my own experience. Right. Yeah. And so in that sense, it's like my truth. Right. But my ideas about this ring that I'm holding in my hand, I mean, they're a kind of a truth. Right. And it's like, but will I feel the same way in 20 years or whatever? You know, like, these thoughts are wrong. They're not true. And so that's really hard. So how do you even get on a platform and say, don't believe anything is true, but believe in your own experience? Yeah. It's like, but then also don't believe anything about it. Right. So we have the law of non-contradiction coming and like we have a contradiction now, right? Yeah. That doesn't make any logical. Yeah, that doesn't make any classical logical sense, but there is a way to hold these two things. And I think it's present in a lot of ancient ideas. Like, you have the moving without moving, the doing without doing, the Wu Wei of Taoism, right? It's doing without. Never heard of it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Never heard of it? Oh, okay.
No, I've never heard of it. It sounds a lot more efficient, but yeah. Yeah,
you ever seen people doing like Tai Chi and stuff? And yeah. You know, and they have and they're moving their chi around, they're moving their energy around, but they try to be with, that's just sort of the sense of maybe how it feels. So you're moving without moving, you're doing without doing. And so it's like, you can't explain it to somebody with words, but you can feel it. Have you ever just done something and you're like, I didn't even realize I was doing that?
Yeah. You mean just like zoning out and doing something, or do you mean like
No, like you're in flow. you ever been like, you ever been coding and then you're like, whoa, I've been coding for like an hour.
Oh, dude. Okay. That experience, not necessarily with coding, but also with coding, is how I approach almost every single task. It'll be 12 hours later.
Yeah.
I'll look up, realize I haven't eaten in a day. You know?
Yeah. And you're just going. You're just like boom, 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 boom. You're not like, that's the doing without doing, right? It's it's the Wu Wei. That's like what it called. I think it's Chinese. And so there's like this weird paradox that exists, and it is doing without doing, right? It's being without being. It's like, so it's, if you just watch children play, they're doing it. They've got it. They figured it out.
Yeah.
It's just what we are, right? That's what we are. That's science. What they're doing is science. Watch them. They'll figure things out and they'll put things together. There's this really, so I haven't seen the study myself, but there's a guy I like on YouTube and he talks about it a lot. And so they had CEOs of companies and then a group of kids, and they had to build, I think it was a house out of popsicle sticks, right?
Uh-huh.
And they had like 1 hour to do it or half an hour or something. And the funny thing is that the kids were all better at building the popsicle houses than the CEOs.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
Here's why. Because they wanted to build it perfectly. And so they were very careful about how they built it. Mm-hmm. And then by the time that they were finished, it just wouldn't work right.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the kids are just sitting there fucking around popsicle sticks the whole time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they eventually figure out how to put the house together. Right.
Yeah.
Because they just played the entire time. And that's what it is. That's what science is. That's what exploration is. That's what we are. That's who we are. Right. It's like inherent within us. Mm-hmm. And we've taken that away and replaced it with truth. And then I'm just sitting here being like, there is no truth there. I can show you where all the cracks are. You know what I mean? Yeah. None of it was right in the first place. It all fell apart. Physicalism's dead. Materialism's dead. It's like dead. Like it's done. Like we can prove it's not true. Now they've, shifted the goalpost, right? So I can show you materialism isn't real. Because it's not. Like we have measurements that we can take and show that it's not. But then they shifted the goalpost to say, well, physicalism is something else. And it's like, well, that's not physicalism now. You're not saying matter is fundamental. You know what I mean? You're not saying that. You're saying something else now.
Yeah, you're just pretending like it's still the same thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that perspective, which the problem is that that's what scientism is built on. Scientism is the institution of science. Scientism is what you're taught in class. Scientism is that we understand these things to be true and we will give them to you and you will accept and say, thank you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that to me is what's over. You know what I mean? Not Newton's work, not Einstein's work, not quantum mechanics, not any of it. It's all still very valid, right? It's all useful. But the idea that it was true is dead. And so I want to ring the bell, and I'm just like, look, guys, like, no, it's not. It was a game that everybody was playing, and their game inevitably showed it wasn't the only game to play. And that's where we're at now. We're at a paradigm shift. So we've known this. Like the founding fathers of quantum mechanics really struggled with this and weren't sure how to deal with it. And then what happened was people who had adopted their work, just the predominant school of thought was shut up and calculate. Right? Was just we're not going to talk about it. You're gonna use the framework, and we don't really give a shit about the philosophy. The problem is that everybody justifies all of their ontological positions on the assumption that the physicists knew what they were doing, and they're like, so they're just like, you can discredit everyone. You can call them pseudoscientists. You can do this, you can do that, because you sort of ultimately are pointing back to like, look, we know everything because of physics. Right. And that's really how it kind of breaks down. But the physicists are like,
yeah, it's, hell, that's how I used to, it's largely still how I approach it. Right. And it's like, although in talks with you, obviously my mind is becoming more opened. Thank you for that. But
Yeah.
But no, I mean, because that's what you figure. It's like, these people are smarter than me. They made it this way for a reason because something worked, right? So it must be the correct answer because we're still getting new information out of it or new data, right?
Right.
But no, I like that because it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And I feel like all of these frameworks, I just feel like every time you get a better one, it just takes longer to hit the limit of it, right? But once you hit the limit, you have to be okay with starting over, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not like you're losing all this stuff. It's not. It's all been discovered. It's all usable, and it has its use cases, and you should continue using them. And
often very beautiful and elegant, and that's what trips us up every time. We make something so beautiful. It's like quantum mechanics. It is a pretty beautiful system. It's crazy, but it is like nice, it's complicated a bit, but it's like nice. Newton's laws, elegant, right? Like Noether's theorem. Like we get to these really elegant things and they're like, yes, that's it. But really it's more of a work of art than it is the ontological truth of the universe,
or even like, because what if kind of one of the first, I don't even know if this is true, but it feels like it is based on what we were talking about. If like kind of one of the first frameworks of describing, proportions of fundamental shapes, right, and how they relate to each other, right, and they extrapolated that out to find things like proportions of like frequencies and harmonics and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
it's like you take all these ideas, you just add more. I don't want to say restrictions. You just add more stuff underneath it, right? That can still explain the stuff on top. It's just more specific and somehow broader in its use, right? Because you can apply it to more places. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if people are that hell bent on dying on that hill, that's baffling to me. Because we've only talked about this 2 or 3 times, and I feel like I'm ready to go, man. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's like we want to unleash the next generation. It's the kids now, right? It's the ones that are coming up now. It's the people in their teens and their 20s and their 30s even still, right? Like it's just like, just go, fuck all this. Like you don't need anybody's permission to do any of it. It's just, we need new ideas that are wild, right? And they're just like freaking crazy. And everyone's like, that'll never work. And it's like, go do that one. You know what I mean? Like, we want that. And when I watch undergraduates come into the physics department and they want that, and they're just like, I want to explore the universe, and they're like, that's what they think physics is. And then they kind of just lose all, just like, they're just like, they just have to do all these problems. And like, I don't give a shit about any of this. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah. It's okay, buddy. Come in.
Yeah. It's okay. But, so we need to lose. We're not going to lose anything, right? It's all going to be there. It's not wrong. Newton's laws aren't like wrong in the sense that I can't use them, right? They're wrong in the sense that they don't describe reality accurately. And neither does Einstein's laws, and neither does quantum mechanics. And I can promise you that because they don't match. They don't come together. And people keep thinking that they'll find it. They've gotten lost in math. And they are no longer looking at what is there, and they are fixated on trying to make math work. And I think that we need a new group of people that's going to want to just be with what is in front of them, and then come up with some wild ideas, right? And that'll be a lot more interesting. And I kind of hope that Donald Hoffman's framework is going to play a role, or a similar like theory. I think it will, but I don't know. And I'm not married to that being needed, that we need that. I just think it probably will.
Well, yeah, you'd be a huge hypocrite if you were. Just saying. But
I really do love it. But I like it because it allowed me permission to think outside of the physicalist box that I was in, and now that I've come out of that box, I'm not going back in. And then I see that it was dying and it was time to leave anyways. what's dying is the ontology, not the frameworks that we had, which weren't even necessarily built from that perspective. It was the modern concept of those frameworks. I'm talking about Newton's laws. I'm talking about electromagnetism. I'm talking quantum mechanics. The modern perspective of where those theories came from was like this grounded realism, this grounded physicalism, right? And that's not necessarily true. Maxwell's equations, which is electromagnetism, came from Faraday's work. It was Maxwell trying to figure out how to explain Faraday's findings. And Faraday was just this wild, like, wow, watch this. Woo! And his hair would, and he's like, ha, 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 and he's like doing that. He doesn't have a degree. He's not a scientist, but he was a scientist. I mean, you can say he's not, I guess, but he was. He just didn't have a degree. And that's who does the most interesting science, or people who are just playing around and they're just like, I want to know how this thing works. And they build these crazy things and it works, and they name their theory after whatever. And, so Maxwell described them. It was all empirical, right? And Maxwell found some elegant, it wasn't even Maxwell himself. Maxwell described all of it. And then later on, people sort of post hoc came in and then like figured out you can condense everything.
Sure.
And then we had these elegant little equations that kind of explained all of electromagnetism, and it was beautiful. It is beautiful. It's wonderful. And it's very, very accurate. Right. And it only doesn't work when you get into like general relativity scales or in quantum mechanical scales. Right. And that's where it kind of breaks down. But you can combine electromagnetism with general relativity, and you can combine it with quantum mechanics, and you can do, so you can get, it's okay. Like it works out, but we can't combine the two though. And so, there's a major failing there. And then there's all kinds of things that cropped up that don't make any sense to us from our theories, because our theories weren't explaining reality. The fact that we have dark energy, the fact that we have dark matter as a concept shows you that our theories weren't explaining reality. It's just a very clear sign, right? They didn't come out as a consequence. There wasn't like, hey, there's going to be the substance we don't know anything about. You know what I mean? It just doesn't do anything, right? Yeah. We can't even really explain. There is no like good model on like how the universe actually came into existence, right? We have the Big Bang, right? But that doesn't explain everything.
Sure.
Right. And it's like, well, how does it actually work? Right. And so the point is that we didn't have it. We had some like really useful tools. And I think that we just are going to we should keep building them. Right. And people should feel free to allow themselves to bring meaning back into exploration. It's okay to want to have a meaning for the thing that you're doing, for the thing that you're experiencing. Like, does the electron have like, so it can get weird, right? Like, is the sun conscious? Like, is it doing this on purpose? Does it know that we exist and it's helping us exist? Does the earth have a sense of consciousness? Is there a meaning to it? Like, these are out there questions, right? But I personally believe, yes, I think absolutely. I don't think that it's a human. I think that's silly. I think that everything is an expression of consciousness, right? And I think that the sun is aware of us. I know that's crazy to say that, but I do honestly believe that. There's some really interesting work on plasma physics that kind of shows how complex plasma can be, extremely complex. And you can get different gradients, and more or less, it starts to look a little bit like neurons moving around and doing stuff.
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me. I didn't need that.
Did you know there's a giant plasma cloud that's stuck? Do you know that there's in orbital mechanics? So when you have rotating bodies, and because of where we are with the moon, and then where we are with respect to the sun, that there's basically pockets that aren't really affected by gravity around the Earth.
Yeah.
L2 and
Lagrange points, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Right. Those are filled with a bunch of plasma, like giant plasma clouds.
Makes sense. Huh.
Yeah. And and that would have come from the sun. So it's like, it's almost, now I don't know this to be true. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying, I think maybe, and it's really interesting to think that the sun might have some sense of what we are. So if you look at here's an even cooler thing. So if you look at stars, there's a guy who even came up, an astronomer who came up with a theory about stars seem to be eating each other, right? Like you have stars that seem to push their way into the orbit of another star and then eat it.
Okay.
And it's a whole theory. I'm not joking.
Like beyond the laws of gravity?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know. Like that's a tough one. So I think that I'm fairly certain he was an astronomer. I almost want to look it up because I don't know too much about him. But it's like the predatory star theory. Pretty sure he's an astronomer. So he's positing that it seems like, I don't think he was saying consciousness. I think he was just saying that it seems like stars have this thing that can happen where they seem to kind of eat other stars, and maybe it's on purpose. So I had this idea that like, well, I mean, it's not my idea. It's that guy's idea, but I'm like, well, what if that's true? So what if the sun is aware of us? And it intentionally tries to, because like, so one solar flare, big enough solar flare right at us would wipe us out, right? It would wipe out all the electronics on the planet, or a lot of it, right?
At least around the planet, yeah.
Right. It could devastate us. Solar weather really strongly affects us, right? And so if we hit the wrong part of a meteor field, we can die, right? And the sun and other stars seem to be able to kind of move around a bit, right? Like we can see ejections from stars that seem to be moving them, right? And it's thought to be like coincidental, or just, it's just pure coincidence, and maybe sure, whatever. But also, what if it's not? What if this gigantic cloud of extremely complex plasma? But the idea is that like, okay, maybe something could happen, right? And now I don't know, but that would be a fun game to play. It's like, what if we just pretended like that was true and then saw what happened, right? And then you play out, then we might see this, we might see that. And what if suddenly that explains dark matter? What if suddenly that explains like the way that stars are going to cluster around each other? I'm not saying it does. I've never done the math, but if somebody was like wanted to explore that sort of a meaning for themselves, right? And like they just found that interesting. What if it did, right? Now modern academia would never accept that as an answer, right? But I think that's meaningless. I don't care what they think. You know what I mean? Like they're not the ones doing it. You know where all these things that we're using in the modern world are coming from? They're coming from the private sector of people just like a company, self-funded, doing this shit themselves. Like technology has been exploding for the last 50, 60 years. Fundamental science has not. It's dead. It's like died. We have no new concepts. We've made a few really interesting measurements, right? We've made a few really interesting discoveries, gravitational waves. We were able to find the Higgs boson. We were a couple of other things, discovery of dark matter or dark energy. But I think that was inevitable. We were going to have to be able to determine that at some point. So all of these things sort of like, but that's kind of it, nothing really new. And it's all based on quantum mechanics, which is really old. So nothing new.
Well, I'll tell you what, too, something, this might be a little bit of a left turn, but something has always rubbed me the wrong way about thinking about discrete numbers when it comes to describing reality. Like in my gut, everything tells me that it just shouldn't be so definitive, like there are only like 4 states of matter. These are the ways that things can interact explicitly. Things are made up of combinations of these things in specific numbers and stuff, or 4 fundamental forces, right? Like I don't know, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that something about it has always just made me feel like it almost feels arbitrary, right? And it's like, okay, well, these are the 4 ways that you can describe it, but does that mean that it only exists on this like specific? And sure, everything points to that's really the only way you can describe it, right? And it's like, they're made up of quarks. They gotta be this way and that way, whatever. I don't know.
If you're going to reduce things like that, then I think that what we have is pretty good. You know what I mean?
It is.
Like if you want to go down like that, it gets particle physics is just, it's, that has made a lot of discoveries based on, So it's like, if you want to zoom in, then it's not, I don't think it's a terrible model. I think it's really useful, but
No, it is.
I think
Yeah.
so. Like when you talk about aggregate things, though, it's not, and then it gets a lot more complicated, and it's not. So our ability to directly calculate these things kind of really goes out the window very quickly. Like once you get to any kind of sophistication at all, like, you can't even hand calculate like, I mean, maybe you could can you do helium? I've never done helium. I've done hydrogen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can calculate orbitals, but it gets really challenging, really quickly. And so, that's where thermodynamics comes in, and you do this other stuff, right? But, yeah, I think when it comes to things like that, we haven't been able to like do a ton of stuff with, like, plasma physics is really interesting. And I'm sure that a lot of plasma physicists would not agree with anything that I just said about like, but I do know that there are specific experiments you can point to where like, it's really interesting. We don't really know what's going on. Right. And if you're going to pretend like, you know, what's going on in the center of the sun right now, I feel like that's really dishonest. I don't think that that's the right way to describe it. You know, like I would say that there's far more we don't know about what's happening. For one, we've never actually measured it. Right. And so it's like, we've never sent a probe into the sun to see what's going on. We can't. Right. And so, I mean, we will though one day. Right. And we do send satellites close to it.
Yeah.
Right. And, so I think we'll be able to like learn more, but I think that what you have these super complex systems. To me, I think everything is a projection of consciousness. And so I think that it is, but I don't understand it, you know? So it's like, I'm not going to say that the sun is making choices like a human would, like, oh, I'm going to move here. I'm going to move here. Like its sense of whatever it's doing is very different than mine. Right. And so you can't read into that. It's nonsense to try to humanize unhuman things. Right.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't something about it that could be. So like like ball lightning. So people report ball lightning all the time, and there's like tons of it. We can't explain it with electromagnetism. Ball lightning. Mm-hmm. It's when you get like a ball, literally a ball of lightning that floats around for like a few seconds, right? And it's not a lightning strike, but it's like a ball of lightning. And people thought it was a myth for a really long time, but it's been reported so frequently. I think there's a pretty good body of evidence that it does exist. It's been on camera and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And nobody knows how to make any sense of it whatsoever. And lightning is like what we see when we look at it is plasma, right?
Right.
And so it's like plasma is kind of a weird thing. It's a very strange phase of matter, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even think of it in terms like that anymore. So I just don't know what it is. And I don't know like what I'm interacting with. And so I'm not going to put like arbitrary, like, I don't think we should hold ourselves back with these reins of these physicalist constraints. However, if we do explore, there's so many tools that it's built that we'd be foolish to ignore it too. Right.
Sure.
And so we wouldn't want to ignore electromagnetism, but if ball lightning says electromagnetism doesn't work, then it's not the ball lightning's problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. That's just an example. I have no idea. I've never seen it myself or anything like that. I was just like, I've seen physicists specifically bring up ball lightning as like a problem to be dealt with, right? Like they were taking it seriously, right? And so, yeah, and the free thinkers, you know, I think that the people who make advances in science are the rebels that don't want to listen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, like we're not going to listen to what you have to say.
It does seem like, it does seem like the people that go with the flow are great for building out data, right?
Yeah.
And then for new discoveries, new frameworks and stuff, it's people that have a bone to pick, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have a lot of free time.
Yeah. Well, that'd be nice. Yeah.
Like Einstein, you know, like he just got to hang out in the patent office. He still he thanked his job for the amount of free time it gave him.
Yeah.
To just like think, yeah.
And then, man, I always wonder about that too, because there's so many times, like back in the Army, right? Sometimes we would just have to run for like a couple of miles, right? And it would take forever because you're just running and you're not allowed to, you got to be in uniform. So you can't like wear an earbud, can't listen to anything. You're just sitting there with your thoughts for, 5 or 6 miles. And you're just like, man, the places your mind would wander. And then I wonder, I don't know, I just thought it was interesting that you can, the ideas that come to your head while you're trying to avoid your current situation have always been the most interesting ideas I've ever had. It's like, you can call it a form of escapism or just imagination land, I guess. But no, I agree. I think there is something very freeing about being placed in a position that you don't want to be in and just letting ideas come to you, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how it worked for Edison. He seemed to always be in a place he wanted to be. But
he would wake himself up as he was drifting off into that state right before he fell asleep. He would hold ball bearings in his hand and then hold them over a plate, a metal bowl actually. And then like as soon as like his hand gave out enough strength and the balls dropped, it would wake him up and then he'd write down what he was dreaming about.
Electrocute one elephant today. God, man, imagine being married to that guy and just fucking trying to fall asleep.
He only slept like 2 hours a day or something like that. 2 to 4 hours a day.
Was he trying to do like a Da Vinci thing where he just sleeps like 15 minutes every hour or something?
Yeah. I mean, that's legendarium. I don't know if I've never actually looked into Edison's life. I always kind of thought of Edison as sort of like the I don't know, more of a businessman, and I really like Tesla a lot more.
Same. Yeah. I mean, I got a tattoo of him on my chest.
I know.
So I'm in Tesla.
Do you
camp.
have Einstein too?
Yeah, I do. My wife hates it.
That's.
No, I'm just kidding. She thinks it's cool, but she's like, man, it is. Sometimes having two faces just staring at me. I'm like, yeah. Oh, man, Hindsight, I probably should have put him on the shoulder, or maybe on my back or something. But yeah. So anyway, but yeah. Well, what else did you want to? Did you want to cover anything else?
That's probably good for today. I think I want to talk about the podcast in general, so maybe I'll stop it now.
Okay.